You know what's interesting? The constitutional protection against cruel and unusual punishment. It's a little interesting. Cruel and unusual. Well, it's two words, both of which can be defined in a separate fashion. Unusual is the one that's a little bit harder. How do you gauge whether or not it's usual? Do 30% of people get treated this way? Is that usual? Does it need to be 51% of people to get treated in this way to become usual? That one is up in the air. But cruel, to me, cruel is pretty easily defined. Now, I have an article here. Texas death row inmates sue the state over brutal solitary confinement conditions. Now, solitary confinement has been declared to be torture. It is torture. It meets the definition of torture. Several international agencies have said that. So, if we have a constitutional protection against cruel and unusual punishment, would torture, something that has been defined as torture, not fit the bill as cruel? Can something be torture and not be cruel? Now, it's possible that torture can be usual, right? You know, the unusual thing is a little bit harder to put your hat on, right? It's possible that torture can be normal, right? It's possible it can be usual and therefore not unusual. But it's definitely cruel, and I don't think that's debatable. Class action lawsuit alleges prison authorities are inflicting cruel and unusual punishment in breach of constitutional rights. Now again, they're saying in this instance that solitary confinement is normal, but their specific version of it in these facilities is so bad that it's way worse than anything else. I say all solitary confinement is cruel, right? But again, if they're going even further, then I mean, come on, right? A class action suit has been brought on behalf of the 185 prisoners on death row in Texas, accusing the state of violating the inmates' constitutional rights by holding them in permanent solitary confinement, in some cases, for 20 years. How is that even possible? How do you keep someone in a box for 20 years? Now, I just want to tell you, if you don't know this already, America is a shithole country. America's garbage. Anyone that says that they like America is either an upper class white person or a freak of nature, right? And now, again, those are basically the same thing. But I mean, seriously, we live in a country that's got more incarcerated people than almost every other country on the world, right? I think we have the most out of any country individually, but you can like group up entire continents and we'd still have more than any other continent. It's insane. I mean, it's insane, right? In this country, we have a prison industrial complex. Does anyone ever think about this? Okay, so check this out. Check this out. This is a pretty good scam, all right? I will admit. So you open a prison, for profit. Yeah, a for-profit prison, right? Now, for those of you that skipped history class, or maybe you went to school in America and they didn't teach you this shit, the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution prohibits slavery. You may have heard of it. You know, slavery. It's no longer allowed. You know, stop the presses, breaking news. Except, but for, in the Constitution, they have a little asterisk and a footnote that says, slavery is illegal, but for punishment for a crime that you're convicted of. So, I am an aspiring entrepreneur, and I'm thinking, well, the U.S. Constitution has legalized slavery. Let's set up a for-profit prison and force them to, like, make license plates or whatever the fuck, you know, the cartoons show them do. And then we don't have to pay them because they're slaves. And it's constitutional. Now, again, I would go as far as to say that the 8th Amendment protection from cruel and unusual punishment kind of nullifies the 13th Amendment that allows slavery, right? You know, I mean, hey, I don't know, but hey, whatever. We live in a pretty interesting country, so, you know, our Constitution doesn't really matter. And once again, there is no such thing as law. Like, I want everyone to understand this. Law is made up. It's not a fact of life. It is not a law of physics. Law is made up, right? I can go in someone's house and steal their shit and get away with it as long as I don't get caught. Now, what is being caught? Being caught is enforcement of the law, right? So if there is in the law a protection from cruel and unusual punishment and it never gets enforced, I got news for you. There is no protection against cruel and unusual punishment. It doesn't exist. It's not real, okay? It's made up. They made it up. But it's more made up than any of the other laws that they do enforce, right? So again, I'm a scammer. Entrepreneur. I'm a business person. I'm going to set up a for-profit prison and utilize slavery. But you know what? I'm trying to make some chain prisons, you know, like Pizza Hut. I want a couple more prisons. I want to try to see if I can get some more prisons in the whole, you know, southwestern region of the country. So what do I need to do? I need to hire lobbyists. What is a lobbyist? A lobbyist is someone whose job it is. That's their job. They get paid for this, and that's it. That's their contribution to society. To go to Washington, D.C. and convince politicians, usually with bribes. We just bribe politicians. It's legal. You can hand a politician a check with thousands and thousands of dollars in it, and then they'll change their vote for you. You can just pay them off. Pretty good system, right? So I am an entrepreneur, and I'm starting a for-profit prison chain, right? So I need to hire lobbyists to go buy off some politicians. And what do those politicians do? They change the law so that they can create more crimes out of thin air. They just make shit up. Oh, you're growing something in your garden? Illegal. Sorry, we're going to send you to jail. Oh, you're black? Illegal. Can't be black here. Going to jail. Right? So they just make up a bunch of fake crimes so that there's more people getting sent to jail. And then they're going to go to my for-profit prison where I can force them to work for free. That's a good deal. I don't know, man. I'm saying if I'm an entrepreneur, a budding business person, I'm going to be jumping at the for-profit prison industrial complex. So again, you know, there is no such thing as a protection from cruel and unusual punishment. I'm going to tell you this much. This lawsuit is going to get thrown out. Because even if it got all the way up to the chain of the Supreme Court, they would not rule in favor of these inmates. They wouldn't. So, even though they're right, by every stretch of every definition, they're right. It is cruel. And you can make the argument that being in a box for 20 years straight is unusual for sure. So it's cruel and unusual. That's a fact. You don't really need a lawyer to explain that. It's just a fact. That's like saying this pen is purple. Yeah, being locked in a box for 20 years, that's cruel. That's unusual. This pen is purple, okay? So I don't know what to tell you, but they're still going to lose their case. Why? Because the Supreme Court, check this out. I'm a for-profit entrepreneur. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take some of my profits from the prison industrial complex that I got, and maybe I'll invest in my brother's budding for-profit university system. And so then I'm going to get a nice big piece of this law school. And we're going to send people to this law school where we're in charge of the curriculum, and then these people are going to become lawyers, and then they're going to become judges, and then they're going to decide cases, and they all learned the foundation of their laws from my scam college. And that's how we have the Supreme Court. That's how you have people like Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. So, it's a pretty good deal. I mean, these people, they really got this system on lock. And again, these inmates are correct. And they're still going to get fucked. Because there is no law. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. There is no law. It's made up. Law and order is made up. Why do you think cops can kill people? That's not in the Constitution. They just made it up. If you have a protection from cruel and unusual punishment, think about how many times police interact with citizens. Literally, thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of interactions. Right-wingers love this line of logic here. Oh, only 0.1% of police encounters are fatal, or they end up killing someone. Great argument, right? That, to me, sounds like it would meet the bill for unusual punishment. So, I'm just looking at the right-wingers in their profound use of logic in this instance. Wow, really? Only 0.01% of police encounters end up with a dead person? Sounds unusual. It sounds like that's something that's very unusual, which would mean that it's illegal under the Constitution, which would mean if they're killing them in a very unusual fashion, it's a very unusual encounter with a police officer, according to right-wingers, right? Very unusual to be killed when interacting with a cop. So therefore, it's unconstitutional. So therefore, if you violate the Constitution, you go to jail. Right? Wrong. 98% of the time, when police kill someone, which as established is unusual, they don't even get charged. They don't even get charged. Again, think about that. They don't even get charged. It's not that they pretend that the system is legitimate and they'll charge them, but then they'll rig the jury or whatever so that they're always getting, found innocent every single time, right? They don't do that. They just don't even bother. They don't even bother charging them in the first place. I have a question. If I killed someone, but let's say it was in self-defense, right? But let's imagine this, right? There's 2 camera feeds. One of them is like a CCTV camera. It shows me walking up to someone and shooting them. Looks pretty cold cut, right? Case cut. I'm guilty. I killed that motherfucker. Right? But then there's another camera feed that my lawyer has access to that shows that person was holding my mother hostage and I killed them to save my mother. And now it's self-defense. That's a whole different case, right? So, but if I killed that person, I would go to the court system and have to go through a trial, and then maybe I'll be determined to be innocent, hopefully, right? But that would be the law and the system functioning. There would be a process that happens. But the cops, they don't even bother. They don't even bother. And again, the law is irrelevant. They don't even fucking bother. They don't even bother with the sham trial, which, by the way, they would probably benefit from because you can just get paid vacation while you deal with the court case, right? So they could probably benefit from it, but they just don't even bother to make it look like the system was working at all. That's how fucked up it is. That's how fucked up it is, right? So anyway, let's just keep reading this. The state's prison authorities are alleged to be inflicting cruel and unusual punishment on the men in breach of their Eighth Amendment, in breach of the Eighth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The lawsuit describes how the prisoners are held in devastating conditions and isolation for up to 23 years without pause. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. With almost 80% of death row occupants having been in solitary for more than 10 years. Quote, the conditions on death row in Texas have been characterized as the most brutal death row conditions in the country. The plaintiffs are seeking relief from conditions that have been described as torture, said Pieter van Tol of the global law firm Hogan Lovells, which filed the suit on behalf of the men in federal court in Houston on Thursday. Texas is facing mounting challenges to its widespread use of solitary confinement. The state currently houses more than 3,000 prisoners in solitary. Blah, blah, blah. So again, you can read the rest of this, but it just goes into the torturous conditions, which I feel like I've covered, how these prisons are both cruel and unusual in a lot of instances. But again, what ultimately matters here is the lawyers have it's a game, set, match case, right? Again, it's like arguing that this pen is purple. Like, no shit, the pen is purple. Look at it, you know? It's like arguing that the sky is blue, right? There's no possible way you will lose unless the game is rigged. But I got news. The game is rigged. They rigged it. It's a fucked up game, right? So, you know, let's say the game asks you, what color is this pen? You click purple. It says, eh. The pen is actually rainbow. Right? So, you know, obviously, you know, all the power to the lawyers, and I hope that they can get at least some temporary, during the appealing process, right, some temporary relief, at the very least. But, of course, they will lose. Nothing will happen, and nothing will save these people, and more people are going to be put into these systems, and they're just going to keep happening because no one else cares. No one in America gives a fuck about any of this because Americans are stupid, lazy zombies that only care about an issue when it's too late after it's affected them and only them, right? You know, something happens to a family member, who cares? Something happens to me, and then they go around screaming, and then guess what? No one cares, just like they didn't care when someone else came screaming to them. That's America. Law and order. All right, sure, if you say so, my friend.